yet?
I'm Eric. Thanks so much for being here and also letting me share some of my work. I'm just going to share my screen. So what I'm going to spend some, hopefully no more than 15 minutes on is just to introduce you to some work that was published last year by myself and a co-author, where we look at, we sort of look at health crises as cases of public policy making. And so what can we learn from health? What can we learn from AMR and related issues like pandemics about the process of policy making, the politics of policy making, and sort of concepts and ideas, theories related to that. And one of the things that we really that really struck us when we looked at One Health and AMR is its relationship to ambiguity. A slightly more technical term for that is polysemic ideas. That One Health really is kind of a polysemic idea. It's an ambiguous idea. So what does that ambiguity do for policymaking, and what does it not do for policymaking? That's sort of the question we were posing in this paper. And one of the thing that makes AMR that makes this also relevant to AMR is that polysemic ideas have been linked to addressing very complicated issues like climate change and various sort of large problems, complex problems, wicked problems, you might call it. And the claim has been that if you use these ambiguous concepts, these polysemic ideas, then you can actually bring people together who otherwise wouldn't be interested or have conflicting interests, bring them together around a common project of doing something about the problem. And so that's what we're sort of addressing using One Health and using AMR is do ambiguous ideas really pull disparate and disengaged interests together to solve wicked problems, or does drawing disparate interests into the same big tent have little or even negative impact on the prospects for effective policy? And so we're using essentially AMR and One Health as a case to explore some of these issues, not necessarily a hard test, but more of an exploration of some of the promises and pitfalls of using ambiguity. In terms of AMR and One Health, this may already be familiar to several people here, but essentially One Health and AMR developed as separate corpuses, separate ideas, or separate, so like the AMR problem developed on its own, and the One Health solution, if you like, or approach developed on its own. But at some point within the last 10 years, those two, the problem of AMR and the solution of One Health became paired. It's hard to say exactly when that happened, but it was probably around in the space between 2010 and 2013. And there's accounts of this written, but you can actually see it in just how WHO starts mentioning these two concepts together increasingly starting in 2013, that there is this sort of pairing of these two concepts happening at that point. And that you can also see that sort of reflected in Australia, and we're comparing Australia to the UK in this paper, where AMR has been this kind of long-standing problem, which Jonathan was also talking about how far back it actually goes, addressing AMR. But the sort of marriage of AMR and One Health is this sort of has happened in the most recent iteration of policy making around AMR. So in the UK, it happened in their first National Action Plan in 2013, and in Australia, it happened in the 2015 Action Plan, which were explicitly framed around One Health as kind of the approach, the strategy against AMR. So what does that actually do for us? Well, One Health is polysemic. So essentially, it's not a very clear, just because you say One Health does not mean you know what the solution is. So when we examine, or when people have examined the One Health concept, what they quickly discover is that firstly, it does have this sort of minimal common ground. In terms of sort of the concept itself, it's something about the interdependency of human, animal, and environmental health. They're interdependent. So a problem in human health, like AMR in human health, spills into animal health, spills into environmental health. They've also, as we're organizationally, been endorsed globally by sort of the three big organizations corresponding to those areas. The World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the OIE, which is the Animal Health Organization. That started happening in about 2010, and for AMR, and there was a global action plan in 2015, which was explicitly framed as a One Health action plan, and that was endorsed by the World Health Assembly in 2016, and the global, and in fact, the UN General Assembly in 2016 also said that AMR is one of the big challenges. But when you look at, when people like Chris Daegling and his colleagues have looked at these various conceptions of One Health, it actually turns out to be polysemic or ambiguous, because there are many different definitions of One Health. And indeed, if we look at the way that the action plans and related implementation plans have described One Health in Australia and the United Kingdom, which we're comparing, in Australia, One Health means essentially that government convenes stakeholders across the sectors of health, agriculture, and the environment. In the UK, it has a quite different meaning. Government holds several kinds of national bodies in those different sectors accountable for specific kinds of, for specific targets. Particularly in human health, but also in environment and food production and so forth. So in fact, these are actually quite different ways of conceptualizing with organizational implications of different ways of conceptualizing One Health. In terms of bringing people together, so we sort of look at what has One Health actually done for us, or what does it actually do? And we sort of look at it in two ways. The first is to sort of see whether One Health in the UK and Australia does seem to have generated sort of actual response coalitions. So bringing stakeholders together. And the second is whether One Health makes policy more effective than the absence of One Health. Do you really need One Health, with other words, for effective AMR policy? And in terms of the first, in both the UK and Australia, clearly lots and lots of stakeholders have been brought together around the concept of developing these most recent AMR strategies and implementation plans. So both governments in Australia and the UK have sort of brought people together from a lot of different sectors. So it definitely does seem to be true that One Health generates response, at least participation. Coalition may be too strong a word, but at least participation from many, many, many sectors and many stakeholders. However, in terms of effective policy, well, it's a little too early to tell whether it's really effective, and we're certainly not going to contend that it doesn't work. That's certainly not what we're going to say. But the thing that we do sort of argue in this paper is that the Australian plan, or the way that Australia has framed its One Health strategy, is a little bit more One Healthy, or a little more dependent on One Health, the One Health concept, than the way the UK has articulated its One Health strategy. And we see this both in terms of the strategy itself, where they mention, they make far more mention in Australia of the One Health concept in the national strategy than the UK does in its national strategy. We also see it, and I'll get back to this in a little bit, in terms of some of those sort of couplings of ideas. So in Australia, it's the One Health is kind of the standalone idea for what needs to happen. It's always kind of bringing people together and hoping that things will occur spontaneously between stakeholders. Hence, government is convening stakeholders. They're not sort of creating targets that specific departments are then accountable for in going forward, at least in the way the strategy is written. And so there's sort of, whereas in the UK, they sort of couple these the sort of hierarchy of government with the One Health concept of bringing many people together, with other ideas and other concepts that sort of lend themselves to specific kinds of solutions, specifically the idea of market failure. A lot of this UK strategy is developed around the idea of market failure. So both countries use One Health, both countries are aware of One Health and frame things in terms of One Health. But in terms of the way the two countries are then reporting their level of action on AMR, the UK is has been a little bit ahead of Australia. It's not that it's a radical difference, but the FAO, OIE, and WHO actually do an annual survey of all the World Health Organization member states, where they ask each member state to report their progress against AMR and a whole series of different indicators, all sort of keyed to the global action plan on AMR. And this is a sort of explicitly One Health kind of framework. So 5 is kind of the maximum score, which means sort of full implementation of all sorts of different things. And 0 is we've done nothing. And you can see across these different categories that I've put up on the screen that both countries are doing quite well. I mean, both of them are sort of in the 3 to 5 category across most of the initiatives. This is actually the 2017 to 18 result. I was just looking at the 2019 to 2020 survey, which there's a little bit of
Erik, your 12 minutes.
Okay. But it's not radically changed. And so what we're seeing is that the UK is just a little bit more, has a little bit more of the same kinds of high level across several of these categories than Australia has. So clearly One Health has not, being sort of very One Health dependent has not meant that Australia has done better than the UK, which relies on these other kinds of mechanisms. It seems like having these other complementary mechanisms, in fact helps make at least more action on AMR. So what has the UK done? Well, it's basically coupled the One Health idea with these central government initiatives to assemble stakeholders that Australia has done, but also reporting and accountabilities or traditional bureaucratic administrative methods, and also international commitments to surveillance. So one of the big things that one of the big differences between the plans is that Australia has a lot less surveillance on animal AMR than it does on human health, whereas the UK has much more animal health related surveillance, and that is linked essentially to the EU, to commitments at the EU level that the UK has then signed up to. So our conclusion essentially is that, of course, One Health has value as an idea, and it's very much like other polysemic ideas. It brings people together, and it also suggests that collaboration is the way forward, because that, after all, is what it's all about, the interdependency between sectors. However, it does not solve politics as usual. It does not solve rival interests. You still need institutions, the institutions of government, to really make progress. And it also may, in fact, not only depend on institutions, but also on complementary ideas like market failure to really show the way forward in terms of what kinds of policy should we actually implement? What should we actually do about the problem? So that's it. That's the end of my presentation, and of course,